The patch notes for Scholar of the First Sin were posted a couple of weeks ago on Bandai Namco's Tumblr feed. I've repeatedly been asked what I think of the changes. Now that there's been some time to digest, here's what I think so far. Added new character, the Scholar of the First Sin. I wonder how the Scholar will be added to the story. Will it be shoved in amongst the regular flow of the game, or will it appear in an additional area? Additional item description text. We've seen a bit of this already with the change to the Soul of the Last Giant. It directly refers to it being the Giant Lord. I'm pretty sure there was also a reference to the Rotten having been the king of Shulva. I like that they're taking the time to clean up the story a bit, even if it comes mostly through item descriptions. To prevent invasion after defeating area bosses, made the human effigy effect function in this situation automatically. This would mean that the host can't be invaded nor summon phantoms in the area leading up to the boss. If nothing else, it gives players a breather after completing an area if they want to backtrack and pick up any loose items. However, I'm worried about the duration. If it lasts as long as a normal human effigy, then there might be a huge reduction in the amount of areas where a player can invade. This is especially true for players who aren't aware of the effect. The Bonfire Warp selection screen will now highlight the top 3 areas where players will have the best chance to connect with other players online. Generally, I like this change, as it means it's easier to find good PvP hotspots. However, I feel like it could have the side effect of amplifying popular areas and leaving the rest of the world deserted. Also, I wonder whether this will take into account your Covenant and Soul Memory, rather than just being a general indicator of the area's popularity. Players on their first playthrough can now match with players on their second or further playthrough. This change should have been in from the start. Arbitrarily separating out players between New Game and New Game Plus has a dramatic effect on the amount of players that you can match with. This is especially true with the differing incentives for staying in New Game or going into New Game Plus. For example, damage from critical strikes is lower in New Game, and certain items and spells aren't available until New Game Plus. Made it easier for players to match online in general. If it's simply changing how Soul Memory tiers are set up, or increasing the amount of tiers you can traverse in multiplayer, then it'll be pretty disappointing. White Phantoms will remain in other players' worlds for longer periods of time. This is generally fine for co-op play, but it makes invasions that much more painful. As an invader, you already have a short timer before you're removed from the host world. Now allied phantoms are more able to wait it out, rather than face the invading player. Made it so that invading players cannot use items which invite more enemies. I'm actually curious as to what this means. If it increases the invasion chance, then what items actually worked? I'm pretty sure I've tried Tokens of Spite. Maybe Dried Fingers or the Delicate String could increase the invasion chance in the host world. Even then, I can only imagine this would have an effect for Fight Clubs or Bell Covenant members. It's probable that this actually refers to ways of attracting nearby enemies, such as Urine or Alluring Skulls. If so, it would prevent cases like using Rupturing Hollows in the Bastille to move and eventually kill Strayed. Players may now choose to cancel out the effect of the human effigy at bonfires. This is needed at least for the human effigy effect when killing bosses. It would allow players to participate in fight clubs or invasions in an area they've just cleared. It's useful even with normal uses of human effigies at bonfires, as the player doesn't need to wait the full duration in order to participate in online play. Host vanquishes invading Dark Phantom or Arbiter Spirit, human effigy. Host vanquishes a Dark Phantom summoned through Red Sign, human effigy. Host vanquishes Abyss Spirit in Dark Chasm of Old, added human effigy to bonfire setting. This is a pretty good change. It'll make it easier to regain humanity if you're repeatedly invaded as a hollow. As a result, it'll be easier to summon phantoms to help proceed through the area. This also makes it easier for PvP to feed into itself, as there will be plenty of effigies to go around. Vanquish Host, you invade at the Covenant Rat King area. Added Smooth and Silky Stone in addition to Pharaoh's Slockstone. Vanquish Client summoned to Rat King area. Added Smooth and Silky Stone in addition to Pharaoh's Slockstone. Vanquish Host when invading as Grey Phantom, one of the following: Titanite Chunk, Titanite Slab, Twinkling Titanite, Petrified Dragonbone. Host vanquishes invading Grey Spirit, Bellkeeper, one of the following: Titanite Chunk, Titanite Slab, Twinkling Titanite, Petrified Dragonbone. It's nice to see additional rewards for participating in these covenants. Currently they see little traffic, as they exist in out-of-the-way optional areas. I'm curious to see whether the patch will modify the surrounding areas, so it's mandatory to pass through the Grave of Saints, Doors of Pharos, or the Belfries. If not in this patch, then at least in the PS4, Xbox One, and DirectX 11 versions of the game. When invading as Brotherhood of Blood, vanquish Blue Sentinel summoned as help, Devotion and Covenant up +2. Vanquish Dark Phantom when summoned as help by a way of blue host. Devotion to Covenant up +1. This is a welcome change. I'm glad that there's now better rewards for succeeding at your Covenant's primary goal. Load time shortened. PS3 only. I'm much more interested in seeing whether they improve the FPS. The game ran so much worse than the 360 version. I've at least heard that it's better on the downloadable version, but the disc version is awful. Remove the blur effect when looking through the binoculars. This should be really nice for players who want to take high-quality screenshots or record video without the HUD. Made it possible to skip the ending sequence the second time through and beyond. Wasn't this already possible? I'm guessing that this might refer to skipping the ending sequence for the first playthrough on additional characters. Calibrations no longer saved each time before the title screen. Adjusted conditions for letting Majula map from defeating Nashandra to defeat Throne Defender and Throne Watcher. Adjusted timing for Lycia of Lindhelt to become the player's enemy. Corrected issue whereby users could not use Bonfire settings at Undead Crypt entrance Bonfire. Fixed issue whereby Sign in the Iron Keep was not displayed as intended once the player spoke to Lucatiel of Mira in Harvest Valley. NPC conversation text is now displayed more prominently than online notices. When a player cannot take part in online play due to the effect of the human effigy, made it so the player can still write signs. They still cannot summon during this period. Fix issue causing map name listed on save data and actual map name after loading to not match. For the most part, these bugs haven't really affected me, so I don't have much to say. Nice to see from cleaning house though. Made it possible to get the reward items after defeating area bosses even if your inventory is full at the time. Items will drop in front of the player. Made it possible to get the reward items after using Crushed Eye Orb and defeating Lycia of Lindhelt even if your inventory is full at the time. Items will drop in front of the player. In Black Gulch, made it possible to receive Forgotten Key after defeating a giant when the player has 99 souls of a giant. In Grand Cathedral, made it possible to still receive the item you were supposed to get when talking to Elsana, Silent Oracle, even if your inventory is full. At the ending, if the player has fulfilled the conditions to receive Illusory Ring of a Conqueror and Illusory Ring of the Exalted but their inventory is full, made it possible to receive the rings properly. Players will receive the rings as soon as space is opened in their inventory. It's interesting to see how many cases existed where you could miss items with a full inventory or full stacks of items. Made Old Iron King's Crown effect function consistently throughout the game. What does this actually mean? Were there cases where spellcasts were replenished more or less frequently than intended? Choosing to enter the Covenant of Champions will now cause enemies to inflict more damage to the player. I wonder if the souls earned from enemies will be increased as well. If not, I suppose it at least remains as the Covenant for players seeking additional challenge. Choosing to enter the Covenant of Champions will now allow enemies to continue to respawn after being defeated. I'm a bit mixed about this. Enemies never should have stopped respawning in the first place. Tying it to a single Covenant doesn't really address that issue. However, it does offer one side benefit which From may not have considered. The pigs in Majula can now be infinitely farmed for cracked Red Eye Orbs. This might significantly increase the frequency of low-level invasions. As a result, we may see more Way of Blue members and therefore also see more Blue Sentinel assists. There may be more opportunities for low-level co-op as well, if players are that much more worried about being invaded. White Phantoms will no longer return to their worlds if time runs out during a boss battle. Even though I've never heard of this, it's a good change. Players shouldn't have to worry about an allied phantom being arbitrarily removed from a boss battle. Increased effect of Rusted Coin. This is a welcome change for anyone who spent a lot of time farming items. As far as I understand, the Rusted Coin not only didn't stack with other items, but granted a really poor increase to the chance to find items. All stones now dropped more often. This might help balance out the increased difficulty for Covenant of Champions members. Rouge Water, etc. Fixed issue causing the user to not recover spell usages for spells only able to be used once. This is a small but welcome change for spellcasters. Adjusted price for Crown of the Ivory King Armor, Ivory King Gauntlets, and Ivory King Leggings. I'm guessing this refers to the amount of Lois souls that the player needs to farm. I'm hoping that's the case. The amount of time that it took to acquire 50 was ridiculous. Speaking of the Ivory King set, I wonder if they're going to make a change to the HP replenishment when killing enemies. Currently, it only affects female characters. The Imitation spell now affects normal enemies. The Hush spell is now more effective on normal enemies. This should be a nice change for sneaky PvE players. I wonder how much of the game could be traversed entirely via stealth and assassinations. Also, with this change, how will these spells be differentiated from Urn? It was pretty easy to run through an area spamming urine to avoid almost every encounter. Players will gain access to a new item, the Agape Ring. When players equip the new Agape Ring, souls collected from kills during online play will be absorbed by the ring rather than the player. This allows players to control their online matchmaking experience by limiting their total souls collected. This change really worries me. Being able to sidestep soul memory could be highly exploitable. Think about the interaction with the added Covenant rewards. A player can participate in PvP and get a ton of upgrade materials with no soul memory cost. It'll become very easy to minimize a player's soul memory while developing an extremely strong PvP build. Even outside of directly acquiring materials via the Rat King and Bellkeeper covenants, the Pilgrims of the Dark Covenant is also problematic. Players can now very easily farm Bonfire ascetics without increasing their soul memory. As a result, players can now repeatedly farm areas where the boss doesn't need to be killed to use an ascetic without increasing their soul memory. This ring could allow twinking to get out of hand very quickly. This problem could be mitigated a bit if the ring was at least only available very late, or after completing the game. However, I'm not confident that this will be the case. I'm also concerned about how this will change ganking behavior. What will prevent a host and phantoms from camping an area and beating on invaders? The repeated success wouldn't at least move them up into later soul memory tiers. Making it this easy to gank will have a dramatic impact on the amount of invaders. Not only is the gank a poor experience in itself, but the low chance of success disincentivizes future invasions. I wonder whether phantoms would still earn souls from enemies slain in the host world while wearing the ring. If they didn't, then it might be much easier to create a character dedicated to co-op with players in a given soul memory range. This is one of the main complaints brought up in regards to soul memory. Alongside these other changes, I'm curious to see what comes of the calibrations. That is, assuming there will be any calibrations at all. I'm of the opinion that Dark Souls 2 needs a lot of balance adjustment. So much potential is being wasted by the current state of the game. Are you satisfied with the changes announced thus far? What do you expect to see when calibrations are released? Feel free to leave a comment and tell me what you think.